So everyone, my name is Darion Wallace. I'm a third-year doctoral student at the Stanford Graduate School of Education in the Race and Equality and Language program.
And my name is Kia Turner. I am also a student in the Race and Equality Language and Education program at Stanford University, and I'm a second year. So today, Darion and I would love to talk to you all about, as a part of our work, what we are doing in the Freedom Dreaming in Education Collective. So within that work, Darion, myself, high school and college-age Black students, teachers, and movement lawyers have come together to build out what we're currently calling the Freedom Dreaming in Education Collective. We see ourselves as a community-based research group that asks the question, how do we theorize, operationalize, and freedom dream abolition in education? To give you an overview of the work we're currently doing, we have 3 projects that are currently off the ground. So the first that is a project that was launched last spring that involved the teaching of a 7th grade abolitionist history curriculum in Brooklyn, New York, which you can see on the left of the presentation. The second is a partnership with the Peer Defense Project, a youth-led legal organization in which we're planning on running a 6-week political education with mobilized youth on youth abolition in New York City in the summer of 2023. The third, which is in a very nascent stage, will involve a workshop to bring together Black youth in New York to run a mutual aid video fighting game tournament in which we hope to study the use of pedagogy in arcadeism and gaming spaces. And the final project is the one we're excited to share about with you, in which we're partnering with a radical teaching organization to study contemporary teachers' understandings of abolitionist education.
And so as we build this work of finding an intersection between abolition and education studies, we sit with a myriad of conceptualizations of abolition. For today's purpose, though, we find it generative and want to offer Justin Cole's definition of abolition as a disruption to the myriad of violences experienced by those deemed marginal to society's functioning. Moreover, we're interested in the dialectical relationship between abolition and fugitivity, in which fugitivity serves as an act of escaping the status quo through various methods of refusal and disengagement to challenge oppressive regimes. In other words, the clearing of subversive spaces makes way for the practice of abolition. In the field of education, though, the term abolition on first pass evokes a degree of unsettledness from families, practitioners, and normative education scholars. For many of them, the word abolition is synonymous with anarchy, or literal quote-unquote burning down of the schoolhouse. But we're not ruling out any possibilities of what the form of the genre of educational abolition may take. We do want to offer pause to the immediate refusal of abolition within the field of education. Here, we operationalize abolition to deconstruct, as Darius Gordon frames, the spectacular and mundane iterations of anti-Blackness that can range from school violence and also the disruption of sleep patterns for students as well. Moreover, abolition creates a space for us to use our radical imaginary that envisions otherwise possibilities for education.
As the abolitionist movement has grown throughout its historical trajectory, it has been founded and profoundly and continually shaped by Black feminists, from the likes of Sojourner Truth, Ida B. Wells, Angela Davis, and many more. Moreover, the contemporary abolitionist movement's dedication to the imagining and building of a world that frees us all has its roots in the humus of Black feminism. As the women of the Combahee River Collective stated, if Black women were free, it would mean that everyone else would have to be free, since our freedom would necessitate the destruction of all the systems of oppression. We therefore position Black feminism as a central tool of abolitionist imagining and abolitionist praxis that encourages us to together building coalitions and dreaming up new worlds that will liberate us all by first liberating the most oppressed. In our work, we therefore try to dovetail the theories of abolition and Black feminism in the conceptual frameworks for our projects so as to guide the methods we actually use with our community partners. One such way is the way we focus on interpersonal relationships as a site of focus for our work, both in and outside the classroom. Adrienne Marie Brown writes that modern-day abolition is about reckoning with the responsibility of embodying abolition in our intimate and neighborhood relationships, about learning what will actually work at the scale of relationship. Moreover, Black feminists paved the way for our relational as political work by elevating the private sphere as spaces of theory making. We therefore position the young people, teachers, and movement workers with whom we work as knowledge creators by working directly with them in the design, analysis, and final write-up of our projects. Moreover, relationship building is the first and central part of all the methods we use in our projects. We've done this by working on projects that bloom from the deep relationships we already have, by foregrounding months of relationship building practice before we begin research, and by establishing a community review board of youth and teachers that deeply know the communities with whom we're partnering. We also see ourselves as drawing from Black feminism and Black studies more broadly in the interdisciplinarity of our praxis. Our collective is dedicated to destroying the binary between past pain and future possibility, particularly for Black youth, by ensuring that our work in collective study is theoretically grounded in the genealogical and ancestral lineage of Black history, Black studies, Black feminism, and abolition thinking. These theories then inform the social design-based methodology we employ. We borrow this methodology from Chris Gutierrez, who encourages us to co-design learning ecologies with youth and communities towards human flourishing in the context of possible futures. And to move forward towards those possible futures, which both social design-based work and abolition calls for us to do, we therefore employ the arts, as did many Black feminists in their theoretical writings, in many of our research projects, encouraging our partners and community relationships to draw, read, and write their way towards new models of education.
And then briefly, we wanted to share a quote from Dr. Davis Duvall, who helps us to begin to think about the separation of education and schooling. We think about the conceptualization of abolition and education. And so he says that it's imperative for the separation of school and education. School abolition in this sense seeks to eliminate the order, compliance, and dehumanization that happens in said buildings, while allowing for the capacity to imagine and enact a radical imaginary.
We also wanted to share, as a part of a conceptual framing for our collective and our projects writ large, this list of 7 abolitionist principles that we created drawing from abolitionist literature. They were first created to frame the project I mentioned earlier about designing an abolitionist history curriculum with a middle school teacher in Brooklyn, New York. And the principles not only functioned as the content, or what we were trying to teach young people, but they also functioned as a theoretical framing for the pedagogical decisions that were made in planning the curriculum and that guided our partner teacher in her pedagogical practice. And so these are principles that we're currently working through and redesigning based off of the data that we collected from that first project, and definitely guide the work that we're doing in each of our subsequent projects as well. So the project that we'd like to discuss today is one that was co-designed with that radical teacher organization based out of New York City. The group is led by teachers for teachers and engages in activities from protest to community building to political education. And we're in relationship with 2 members of this group who've run a 6-week political education course on abolitionist teaching for the past 3 years that they call an Inquiry to Action group. So we conducted exit interviews for the participants in the Inquiry to Action group that ran last spring to explore how the participants were able to make sense of school abolition as it related to their own classroom practice.
And so the guiding research questions for the project are: how do teachers who identify as abolitionist teachers understand, 1, the theory, practice, and radical pedagogies of abolitionist education, and 2, how say contemporary practices are situated in the historical continuum of the 19th and 20th century abolitionist educators in the United States. And so to build this project out, we're using a conceptual framework deeply rooted within Black studies. And so we build upon these fertile grounds by investigating how a Black studies orientation can develop abolitionist education research. With deep ponders on the position and construction of the Black within the social strata of the world, we're interested in the vibrancy of Black social life within Black educational spaces. That is to say, as Katrina Sharp frames it, that even as we experience, recognize, and live subjection, we not simply or only live in subjection as the subjective. This project is deeply interested in the Black social life of Black students within the apparatus of American education. We recognize Blackness beyond the bounds of its ethnic, political, and cultural formation, but focus in on the structuring force of Blackness that serves as the ongoing antagonism to the very category of the human itself. Here we employ Black critical theory to understand the position of the Black within American educational structures. Dumas and Ross help us to clarify, first, that Black Christian education promises to help us more incisively analyze how social and educational policy are informed by anti-Blackness and serve as a form of anti-Black violence, and following from this, how these policies facilitate and legitimize Black suffering in everyday life of schools. In response to the ongoing persistence of anti-Blackness since the inception of American schooling, educators have formulated educational counterspaces for Black students. Gibbons theorizes action as fugitivity, which is the constant seek of an outside to white supremacy that might elusively be understood as Black freedom. And Ross extends this term through a conceptualization of Black educational fugitive space, which is described as intentionally a radical type of possibility that exists in the margins outside of the typical discourses of schooling. Here, abolitionist teachers can thrive in the possibility of radical futures. And we employ this conceptual framework to formulate our arc of abolitionist-oriented inquiry that seeks to interrogate how self-identified abolitionist teachers are making an essential difference in how the epistemological order of colonial racial logics are cohered within U.S. classrooms. And so our methods, we employ the social design-based experiment methodology to bridge the theory and practice in the construction of abolitionist-oriented middle school history curriculum. Gutierrez asserts that social design-based experiments are concerned with how the world gets built to advance some view of practice and not others. A brief synopsis of the core principles of this orientation is a deep attention to history, focus on cultural mechanisms, making equity an ideal, material and actionable tool, a focus on systems rather than individuals, and understanding culture as a resource. And so we use critical qualitative methods to locate the myriad sources spurring Black oppression stemming from anti-Blackness. We engage in systematic and flexible guidelines for collecting and analyzing our data to construct theories grounded in the data itself. So to this aim, we use inductive and deductive coding schema to structure the webs of meaning from the data. Codes include anti-disposability, undoing systems, care for the whole, literacy is freedom, and the radical imaginary. And I'll pass it to Ian to begin our findings.
So to begin, I'd like to take you through two findings from our initial data collection that come specifically from some of our Black female educators, which is where we've begun our data analysis. So the first is that these teachers in particular embody a practice of deep and active listening when it comes to young people. Specifically, our teachers describe how the ways in which young people show up in their bodies determines the direction of their classrooms. One of our teachers, Amira, who is a Black early childhood educator, describes how play must be centered in the foreground of her classes with pre-service teachers whom she also teaches. She says, "I think again, people want to see play as a way to help children learn. And I want you," speaking to her pre-service teachers, "to understand play as a way to free yourself and to free children in the process." Here, Amira not only directs her students to see play as a practice of freedom, but also encourages her pre-service teachers themselves to engage in the world through a lens of physical embodiment. In this way, we see that following the physical signs of youth self-determination in classrooms is not only a way to free young people, but also a way to free teachers as well. Madison, another Black educator who runs an outdoor early education school, says, "What I would love to be able to support is the facilitation that young people are able to distinguish what they want to experience and how they want to contribute in their body." Here, Madison draws directly on youth and their experiences of physical embodiment as being the primary goal of her educational practice, and also of teaching young people how to exist communally through their own particular and unique strengths, when she finishes by saying, and when I talk about contribution, I mean like to their own life, like what do they want to contribute to themselves, in terms of their satisfaction of their lifetime? What do they want to contribute to their family, to their community, to the society they want to participate in? We also found that a core part of our teachers' abolitionist praxis was involved in deep experimentation and or expansive thinking beyond the physical walls or traditional constraints of classroom culture. In discussing the reason why she wanted to create her outdoor school, Madison referenced her own experience with wanting her daughter to have a more expansive educational experience when she says, "And yet, here we are, we're stuck in this room, there's like nothing we can do. It doesn't work. It doesn't want to be that loud. So taking that physical dynamic out of the equation, there's many more possibilities. And so that felt right to me. I thought that her voice needed to be in wall-less areas. Like Madison, Amira also embodies the practice of experimentation through the ways in which she assesses her pre-service teachers. She says, I don't keep grade books anymore. I don't. I used to do points, I used to divide the class into 6-point assignments. I don't even have to think about that anymore. All I have to do is write a narrative evaluation based on what they did in class, what I asked them to do, what their strengths were, where they could have done more, and so that is a whole different way of thinking. Both of these women push themselves and their practices beyond the bounds of what many teachers and students think could currently be possible within the education system today. However, each of these women also noted that the conflict they felt, given they saw that their expansiveness and their experimentation were only possible because of the fact that they both practice outside the sphere of public education. While Madison runs her own private outdoor school, Amira felt conflict that she was able to grade more experimentally because she was at a private institution. Both of these women therefore bring to light an inherent tension when we think about the radical imaginary beyond a capitalist system of education. And then when it comes to a broader set of our data, many teachers identify the arts as an inherent part of their teaching practice towards abolition. Sarah, a high school Spanish teacher, explained this about bringing the arts into her Spanish class. So like around those conversations, we created collages together about what we imagined, how our school would be if it felt like a home place. Like, what could we change? What could we do? And they created these wonderful collages, so much nature, art, colors, music, words like freedom and silence.
So now I'll turn our attention to the opportunities of growth that we experienced through interviewing these self-identified abolitionist teachers. And so in this project, we found an absence of direct engagement with race, speaking with our participants. While they demonstrated keen literacy in matters of feminism, capitalism, adultism, and the likes, the conversations of race were entirely absent from their discourse on abolition. We found this striking given the epistemological genealogy of abolitionism that harkens back to anti-slavery abolitionists, especially those who held the seat as educators, such as Jeremiah Burke Sanderson, Susan Paul, and Maria Stewart. Anti-slavery abolition not only indicts the dehumanizing system of chattel slavery, but was also an early call to disrupt the logics of stratification beholden to the category of the human. Needless to say, this is a missed opportunity for our abolitionist teachers. And a final finding that we'll share is that there was a lack of specificity with school abolition. They were able to grapple with some of the larger terms of abolition, thinking about how it's applied within this field. We saw some of the teachers struggle with this. And so when we asked them in the interviews, one of the teachers stated that, no, I think it's the same. It's just looking at things from a system perspective. And education is just another system. And this misses the opportunity for us to be able to think very deeply around what are the integral ways that anti-blackness is showing up, that we can have opportunities to disrupt and through our abolitionist pedagogy. And so in closing, ultimately we hope that this project seeks to equip K-12 educators and Black youth with the analytical skills to name, resist, and dismantle systems of oppression in their local and global contexts, while simultaneously developing their capacity to freedom dream new cognitive maps that are more hospitable than the ones they know.
We're interested in how we might build and design with young people, teachers, and educators around some of the current practices, new modes of public education, where young people, including high school students, get to lead with their bodies. How can the education field learn from the teachers who are most often marginalized within the field itself for not doing real education, particularly teachers who teach young people that are aged before school, as the source of innovation that could inspire similar types of expansive thinking in middle and high school educational spaces, particularly for Black students?